So hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and today I thought I would talk you through all the unread books on my shelf that are classics but not Victorian books. So a fair while ago, when I was thinking about my sort of reading goals for 2018, one idea I had was to have sort of themed months, where I'd pick a theme and for a particular month I would read books to fit it in with that theme. And I decided in the end that that was a bit too prescriptive and that I wasn't going to do it, but I did have a few theme ideas that I still really wanted to do. And one of them was to have a month where I focus on non-Victorian classics. I read a lot of classics, but the vast majority of them are Victorian novels, which is because I adore Victorian literature, but there also are a lot of other classics that I've enjoyed that aren't Victorian, and a lot of classics that I would love to read that aren't Victorian. So I've pulled off my shelves all my non-Victorian classics, and I've got a few more on my Kindle or in my head that I would like to read, and I thought I would go through them today. I'm not promising to read all of these in the month of March. I'm sure I will read less than half of them in the month of March, but I thought I would make March sort of vaguely themed around non-Victorian classics, and hopefully I will get through a fair few of these this month. I will start off with two non-Victorian classics that I would like to reread because that's a bit different. One is Anthony Powell's A Question of Upbringing, which is the first book in A Dance to the Music of Time. Handily, I'm about to start hosting a read-along of this book and the entire series, and in the read-along we'll be reading this first book in March, so I know I will be reading it this month, and I'm really excited for it. And then I'd also love to kind of read and kind of reread Spring Storm by Tennessee Williams. I think I have read this. I know I've definitely seen it on stage, and I think I did actually read it in the physical form as well. That spine looks slightly bent, so I'm going to say I did, but it's certainly been a long time since I read it. This is one of my favourite plays. It follows a woman called Heavenly in early 20th century America who is torn between two different men, and it's just wonderful. As it's a play, it shouldn't take me long, so hopefully I'll get to this month too. Before I get on to the books I own, I do want to talk about a couple of American classics that I don't own in physical copy that I would really like to read. I would really like to read Of Mice and Men, and I would really like to read Catcher in the Rye. Both of them are books that I feel like a lot of people read as teenagers and I didn't quite get to, and I hear a lot of good things about Of Mice and Men and a lot of mixed things about Catcher in the Rye, and I think they'd both be quite interesting to read. Another American classic I'd really love to read is Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. I read Fahrenheit 421, 451? That one. I read that novel by Ray Bradbury a year or two ago and absolutely adored it. Loved the writing, found it so moving and so brilliant. One of the best sort of dystopian books I've ever read. And I hear great things about Dandelion Wine by him. I know Yamini from The Skeptical Reader said it was absolutely incredible. I believe that's more realistic, partly sort of autobiographical, so that sounds like a really interesting one to read. Quite a lot of the non-Victorian classics on my shelves are classics in translation, but before I get onto them, I want to talk about some of the 20th century classics that I have on my shelves. One of them is Goodbye to All That. This is a memoir by Robert Graves, who was a writer and poet, talking about his experience in the First World War. I would say that World War I and the interwar period immediately after it and the effect of World War I on culture, that's probably like my second favourite time period to read about or to study after the Victorian period. And I've read some of Robert Graves' poetry before and really enjoyed it, so I'm really hoping to get to this soon. Then I also have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, a great favourite on BookTube. I actually bought this on a BookTuber meetup when Lauren from Lauren the Books persuaded me to buy it, and that was about a year ago, and I haven't read it yet. I'm not sure whether I will like Daphne du Maurier or not, and I think that's why I've been putting her off. You probably know the basic premise of Rebecca. It is about a woman who gets married to a man that she doesn't know that well and then discovers that he has a previous wife who has died and that dead wife seems to haunt everything. I'm looking forward to reading it and seeing whether I want to go down the Daphne du Maurier route and read more of hers or not. I also have two Persephone classics. This is Marina by Monica Dickens, and yes, that is the great-granddaughter of Charles Dickens, which I must confess is probably the only reason why I own this. Nonetheless, it's a book from the 40s, and I know that the first half of the 20th century is a time period that really interests me, and I also feel that I trust Persephone classics after Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day, which was so utterly wonderful. I don't know that much about this book, but I believe it is the story of a young woman and her sort of attempts to fall in love. The introduction of this book describes it as having some things in common with Bridget Jones' Diary, which I haven't read, but I've seen the film, and that makes me very curious about what a 1930s/40s Bridget Jones's Diary would be like. The other Persephone classic I have is The Homemaker by Dorothy Canfield Fisher. It's an American classic written in the 1920s and it's about a small town in America, and it's supposed to be about family life and the position of women, and I think it should be an interesting one. On to the translated classics. Here's Aesop's Fables. I've definitely read some of these before, but I definitely haven't read Aesop's Fables all the way through, and I think it'll be quite interesting and quite a different read, possibly quite refreshing in the middle of some of these slightly heftier books. Two more collector's library editions, both slightly hefty French novels. Here is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. When I finally get round to reading this, which may be at some point in the next year, but probably not this month, me and Carolyn from Carolyn's Reading Rambles have been saying for a while that we were going to read it together, but we haven't quite managed to do that yet. I'm also not going to be reading it from this copy because this copy is sadly abridged, which I didn't know until after I'd got it. I say that, I've owned this for quite a long time. I actually know very, very little about this book, but I do know that it was my grandmother's favourite book. Apparently it's partly about a man called Dante who has been betrayed by several people around him, and then years later the Count of Monte Cristo, a mysterious figure, appears and stumbles across the people who betrayed and ruined Dante's life. I feel like I'm gonna like this because it sounds slightly Les Miserables / Tale of Two Cities, so well, we'll see how this goes. Maybe I should try and prioritise this one. The one I really ought to prioritise, which I think I'm gonna try and read this month, and we'll see how it goes, The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. This is the book that has been on my shelves the longest unread. I have owned this for about 10 years. I read Les Miserables by Victor Hugo when I was 14, 15, absolutely loved it. Got this very, very soon after for Christmas or a birthday and didn't read it. I love Les Miserables so much, I adore it, it's absolutely brilliant, I loved it. But apparently long novels daunted me much less when I was 14 than they do now. It's not even that long. I've read longer books, I just never seem to be getting to this one. So hopefully I'll try and read this month. I've got one piece of South American literature on my list, and that is Borges's fiction. This is a collection of short stories by Borges, which I would like to read because I feel like I ought to give Borges another chance. I have read some of his short stories before on a short story module I did for my creative writing masters, and I didn't love some of them. Or what I found was the really short ones I liked, and the longer they got, the more I found them really confusing. I found his writing style a little too modernist / postmodernist for me. I am curious to see how giving him another go in a less academic setting might work. While we're on short stories, here's a Russian collection of short stories. This is Ivan Turgenev's First Love and Other Stories. I have actually read First Love, which is one of the stories in here, which I've actually read twice and really, really enjoyed, and I'd love to read some more Turgenev, but I just haven't got round to it, so hopefully I might pick this up this month and go through some of the stories in this that I haven't read yet. Talking of Russian literature, there's also War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I am reading this, I am enjoying it, I'm just taking it very, 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 very slowly. I loved Anna Karenina and I love the television adaptation of this, and I love sweeping, broad, many-charactered novels that are set in the 19th century and deal with interesting historical time periods. It's just that the book is huge, and I don't mean that the book is long, because long is fine, it's that this physical copy is massive, and I am considering getting War and Peace on Kindle and not reading the physical copy because I think that might mean I actually read it. Just too big. I need a book that I can read on the train. Finally, two Asian classics. This is a Chinese play, The Tea House by Lao Che. I bought this when I was on holiday in Hong Kong, mostly because it's called The Tea House, and also because the book is English on one page, Chinese on the other page. I can't read Chinese characters, but I thought it would be quite fun and interesting to see them laid out together. I don't know that much about this, but it is set in an old tea house in Beijing and spans 50 years of Chinese history, so I think this is going to be a really interesting one. Finally, I have a Japanese short story collection by Akutagawa. I don't know that much about these stories, but I know my uncle gave me this for Christmas, I think probably a year ago, and I definitely trust his taste in Japanese literature. He's one of the people that got me into Japanese literature, and I just haven't read any Japanese literature for ages. I really enjoy it, but it's something that slightly slipped off my radar in the last year. But I've really enjoyed some of the Japanese classic short stories I've read in the past, so hopefully I will really enjoy this one. So that's it. Those are all of the non-Victorian classics on my TBR. I'm hoping to get to quite a few of these in the month of March, but definitely by no means all of them. Please let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these that you particularly loved and you'd like to recommend me, and if there's any other non-Victorian classics that you think I would really enjoy. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.